Book 10. Captains Fight and Die. Now the gates of mighty Olympus's house are flung wide open. The father of gods and king of men convenes a council, high in his starry home. As throned aloft he gazes down on the earth, the Trojan camp and Latian ranks. The gods take seats in the mansion, entering there, through doors to east and west, and Jove starts in. You great gods of the sky, why have you turned against your own resolve? Why do you battle so much? Such warring hearts. I ordered Italy not to fight with Troy. What's this conflict flouting my command? What terror has driven one or the other side to rush to arms and rouse the enemy's swords? The right time for war will come. Don't rush it now. One day, when savage Carthage will loose enormous ruin down on the Roman strongholds, breach and unleash the Alps against her walls. Then is the time to clash in hatred, then to ravage each other. Be at peace for now. Spirits high, consent to the pact I have decreed. Jove is just that brief, but golden Venus is far from brief as she replies, O Father, everlasting king over men and all the world, what other force could we implore to save us now? You see the Rutulians on the rampage? Turnus amidst them, proud in his chariot, puffed up with his new success, spurring the war lust on. Their thick armored walls can no longer shield the Trojans. Now they are even fighting inside their gates. It's combat, cut and thrust, right on their own ramparts, trenches bathed in blood. And Aeneas knows nothing. The man is miles away. When will you ever let them lift the siege? Once more a new force, a new army threatens the walls of newborn Troy. Once more he springs from Arpi, that Aetolian, Diomedes. So once again I see some wounds are in store for me, your daughter, and I must block the mortals hurling spears. If without your assent, against your will, the Trojans have reached Italy, let them pay for their latest outrage, never grant them rescue. But if they have followed the oracles laid down by the gods on high and the great shades below, how can anyone overturn your edicts now and plant the fates anew? Why recall it all? The armada burned to ash on the shore of Eryx, the storm king lashing gales from Aeolia into fury, Iris swooping down from the clouds? Now she even stirs the dead, the one realm in the world still left untested. Yes, and Alecto, suddenly loosed on the earth, tears like a Aeneid through the heart of Italian cities. Empire stirs me no longer. Now, that was our hope while fortune still smiled. Now let those win out, the ones you want to win. If there is no patch of earth that your ruthless queen could grant the Trojans now, I beg you, Father, by the smoking wreck of Troy, let Ascanius have safe passage out of battle. Spare my grandson's life. As for Aeneas, let the man be tossed on strange new seas. Follow the course where fortune leads the way. Just give me strength to shield my grandson, bear him quite unscathed from the raw clash of arms. Why, I have Amathus, Paphos' heights, and Cythera too, an Idalian mansion, there with his weapons laid away, to let him live his life out, all unsung. And so, give the command for Carthage to crush Italy, overwhelm her with force. From Italy comes no barrier posed against the towns of Tyre. What good has it been to flee the plague of war, to slip through the thick of fires set by the Greeks? Drain to the lees the perils at sea, and the whole wide earth, while the Trojans hunt for Latium, hunt for Troy reborn. Better no, to settle down on their country's dying ashes, the ground where Troy once stood. I beg you, Father, give them back their Xanthus and their Simois, if these luckless Trojans must, once more, relive the fall of Troy. At that, Queen Juno looses her fury, bursting out. Why drive me to break my deep silence, to open up my wounds, long scarred over, and bruit them to the world? How could anyone, man or god, force your Aeneas to pitch on war, to harry King Latinus as his foe? So he sought out Italy under the Fates' command. The Fates? Cassandra's raving spurred him on. Did I press him to leave his camp or cast his life to the winds? To trust his walls, the whole command of the battle to a boy? To disrupt the Tuscan's faith, inflame a peaceful people? What god, what ruthless power of mine drove him to ruin? Where's Juno in this? Or Iris sped from the clouds? So it's wrong for Italians to ring your newborn Troy with fire? For Turnus to plant his feet on his own native soil? His forebear is Pilumnus, his mother a goddess, Venilia. What of the Trojans putting the Latins to the torch, yoking the fields of others, hauling off the plunder, taking their pick of daughters, tearing the sworn bride from her husband's arms? Their hands pleading for peace, will they arm their stern with spears? Oh, you can whisk Aeneas clear off the clutches of the Greeks. In place of a man, puff up some vapid fume of air. You can change an armada into sea nymphs, yes, but if we in our turn offer the Latian side a helping hand, is that such a horrid crime? Aeneas knows nothing. The man is miles away. Unknowing, let him stay there. Why, you have Paphos, Idalia, steep Cythera, too. Why tamper with brute Italians, a city rife with war? It is I who try to overwhelm from the roots up your sinking Phrygian state? Not I. Wasn't it he who exposed your wretched Trojans to the Greeks? What inspired Europe and Asia to surge up in arms, underhandedly breaking the bonds of friendship? Was it I who lured the Trojan adulterer on to lay Sparta low? Or I who equipped the man with weapons, fanned the flames of war with lust? You should have feared for your chosen people then. It is too late now for rising up with your groundless accusations, flinging empty slander in my face. While Juno harangued the gods with her peals, all were murmuring low, assenting, dissenting, low as the first stir of storm wind caught in the trees, when the rustling, unseen murmur keeps on rolling, warning sailors that gales are coming. Then the Almighty Father, power that rules the world, begins, and as he speaks, the lofty house of the gods falls silent. Earth rocks to its roots. The heights of the sky are hushed, and the western breezes drop, and the ocean calms its waters in peace. So then, take what I say to heart and stamp it in your minds. Since it is not allowed that Latins and Trojans join in pacts of peace, and there is no end to your eternal clashes, now, whatever the luck of each man today, and whatever hope he follows, Trojan or Italian, I make no choice between them. Whether Italy's happy fate lays siege to the camp, or the Trojans' folly, the deadly prophecies they follow. Nor do I exempt the Italians. How each man weaves his web will bring him to glory or to grief. King Jupiter is the king to all alike. The fates will find the way. And now, sealing his pledge by the river Styx, his brother's stream, by the banks that churn with pitch-black rapids, whirlpools swirling dark, he nodded his assent, and his nod made all of Mount Olympus quake. The great debate had closed. Jupiter rises up from his golden throne, as the gods of heaven flock around him there and escort him to the gateway of his mansion. All day the Rutulians encircle every entry, battling on to bring their enemies down in blood and ring their walls with fire. But Aeneas' force is locked fast in its own ramparts now. No hope of a breakout. Shattered, helpless, posted high on the turrets, girding walls with a thin defensive ring of Aetius, son of Ambrasus, Diomedes, Hicetaon's son, the Assaracene twins, and Castor, with aged Thymbrus up in front. Behind them, both Sarpedon's brothers, Clarus and Thamon, new allies from Lycia's highlands. One man puts his weight into heaving up a boulder, no mean piece of crag. Acmon, born of Lyrnessus, strong as his father Clytius, his brother Menestheus. All of them struggle there to defend their walls, some with javelins, some with rocks or flinging blazing torches, knocking arrows to bowstrings. There amidst them, look, the Dardan boy himself. Venus's favorite, rightly, handsome head laid bare. He shines like a brilliant gemstone set in tawny gold, adorning a head or neck, or a glow as ivory deftly inlaid in box, or black Orician terebinth wood, and over his milk-white neck his long locks fall, clasped tightly by a torque of hammered gold. Ismarus, you too, your fine hardy fighters, watched you dipping your arrowheads in poison, winging wounds at the enemy. You, the noble son of a proud Maeonian house, where the farmhands worked the loamy soil, and Pactolus floods the fields with gold. And there is Menesthius too, his glory riding high with yesterday's triumph, driving Turnus off the walls, and Capys too, whose name comes down to us in Capua, the famed Campanian town. And so both sides had clashed in the cruel thick and fast of war, while Aeneas plowed the sea in the dead of night. Once he left Evander and entered the Tuscan camp, he seeks King Tarchon, tells him his name and stock, and the help he needs and the help he brings himself. He tells him Mezentius musters fighters to his side, tells him the heart of Turnus flares for battle, warns him of what to trust in men's affairs, concluding all with his own strong appeals. Then no delay, Tarchon joins forces at once and seals a pact. And so, free of fate's demand, since they are sworn to a foreign leader now, under the will of God the Etruscans set sail. Aeneas' ship in the lead, with Phrygian lions fixed on her beak, Mount Ida looming aloft, a God-sent sign of home to Trojan exiles. There sits great Aeneas, musing over the shifting tides of war, as Pallas flanks him closely on his left, asking now of the stars that guide them through the night, and now of the hardships he braved on land and sea. Now throw Helicon open, muses, launch your song. What forces sail with Aeneas, fresh from the Tuscan shores, manning their ships for battle, sweeping through the waves? Massicus first. He plows the sea in the bronze-sided Tiger. Under him sail battalions, 1,000 men who put astern the walls of Clusium. Cosae, too. Their weapons, arrows, shouldering lightweight quivers, bows bristling death. Fierce Abas joins him, all his fighters shining in arms, with the brilliant gilded Apollo stationed at the stern. 600 men his motherland Populonia gave him, soldiers drilled for war, 300 more from Ilva, the blacksmith's inexhaustible island, rife with iron ore. Asylas III, the famous seer who bridges the worlds of gods and men, a reader of animals' entrails, stars that sweep the sky, and the cries of birds and the lightning charged with fate. 1,000 men he rushes aboard, tight ranks spiked with spears. Pisa places them at his command, a Greek city born by the river Alpheus, bred by Tuscan soil. And following in his wake sails irresistible Astur who trusts to his horse and armor rainbow-hued. And swelling his ranks, 300, all as one, alert to obey his orders, men whose home is in Cere, men from Minio's fields, from ancient Pyrgi, and fever-racked Graviscae. Nor could I pass you by, Cuneris, staunchest in war of all Liguria's chiefs, or you with your modest band of men, Cupavo, topping your crest the swan plumes toss, a fabulous mark of your father's altered form, and all for offending you, love, you and Venus. They tell how Cycnus, wrung by grief for his lover, lifted a song to soothe his broken heart for Phaethon, shadowed by leafy poplars. Phaethon's sisters once. Cycnus donned the downy white plumage of old age, left the earth behind, and soared up to the stars on wings of song. And now his son Cupavo, flanked by fighters his own age on deck, drives along under oars the giant centaur. The monster high on the figurehead makes threats to heave from aloft a massive boulder down on the waves, while the long keel cuts its furrow through the deep. Ocnus, too, heading an army come from native coasts, a son of Manto the seer, and the Tuscan river Tiber. He gave you, Mantua, walls and his mother's name, Mantua, rich in the roster of her forebears. Not all of a single tribe, but 3 in 1, 4 clans under each, and Mantua leads them all, and the city draws her force from Tuscan blood. Mantua, source of the 500 men Mezentius goaded on to fight against himself, men that Mencius, son of Father Benacus, gowned in gray-green reeds, steers down to the sea in warships built of pine. Olistes bears down too, surging on with the beat of 100 oaken oars that thrash the swells, churning the sea's clean surface into spume. He sails the massive Triton, her sea-horn making the blue deep quake, and as she runs on her prow, displays a shaggy man to the waist, all dragon to the tail. Under the monster's breast, part man, part beast, the foaming swells resound. So many chosen captains heading 30 warships, speeding to rescue Troy, cleft the fields of salt with beaks of bronze. By now, the day had slipped from the sky, and the gentle moon was riding high through the heavens at mid-career, her horses pounding through the night. As pressures gave no rest to his limbs, Aeneas sat astern, guiding the tiller, trimming sail, when suddenly, look, a troop of his comrades comes to meet him. Halfway home, the nymphs that kindly Cybele told to rule the sea in power, changing the ships to sea nymphs, swimming abreast, cutting the waves, as many as all the bronze prows berth at anchor once. They know their king far off, circling, dancing round him, and one, most eloquent of them all, Cymodocea, swims in on his wake and grips his stern with her right hand, arching her back above the swells as her left hand rows the silent waves, and she calls out to Aeneas, lost to it all. Awake, Aeneas, son of the gods! Wake up! Fling your sheets to the wind! Sail free! Here we are, the pines from the sacred ridge of Ida. Now we're nymphs of the sea. We are your fleet. When traitorous Turnus forced us headlong on with sword and torch, we burst your mooring lines. We had no choice, and now we scour the seas to find our captain. The great mother pitied us, changed our shape. She made us goddesses, yes, and so we pass our lives beneath the waves. But not your son, Ascanius, trapped now by the wall and trench in the thick of the spears. The Latins spiked for war. Already Arcadian horsemen, flanked by strong Etruscans, hold assigned positions, but Turnus is dead against their joining up with the Trojan camp. He's setting his own squadrons between their closing forces now. Up with you! Call your men to arms with the dawn. That first, then seize the indestructible shield the god of fire gave you, ringed with gold. Daybreak, if you find my urgings on the mark, we'll see vast heaps of Rutulians cut down in blood. She closed with a dive and drove the tall ship on with her right hand. How well she knew the ropes! And on it flies, faster than spear or wind shaft, while the rest race on in her wake. The Trojan son of Anchises, stunned with awe, his spirits lift with the sign and scanning the skies. Above his head, Aeneas prays a few strong words. Ida's generous queen and mother of the gods, by Dindyma, dear to your heart, by towered cities, the double team of lions yoked to your reins, lead me in war. Bring on the omen, goddess. Speed the Trojans home with your victor's stride. No more words. As the wheeling sun swung round to the full light of day and put the dark to flight, first he commands his troops to follow orders, brace their hearts for battle, gear for war. Now Aeneas, standing high astern, no sooner catches a glimpse of his own Trojan camp that he quickly hoists his burnished, brazen shield in his left hand. The Trojans up on the ramparts shout to the skies. Fresh hope ignites their rage, and wing their spears like cranes from the river Strymon, calling out commands as they swoop through the air below the black clouds. Flying before the south winds, cries raised in joy. The Rutulian king and the Latin captains marvel till, glancing back, they see an armada heading toward the shore, and the whole sea rolling down on them now in a tide of ships. From the peak of Aeneas's helmet, flames are leaping forth, and a deadly blaze comes pouring from its crest. The golden boss of his shield spews streams of fire, strong as the lethal, blood-red light of comets streaming on in a clear night, or bright as the dog star, Sirius, bearing plague and thirst to afflicted mortals, rises up to shroud the sky with gloom. But dauntless Turnus never lost his faith in his daring, certain to seize the beaches first and hurl the invaders off the land. Now then, here is the answer to your prayers. We'll break them all by force. The god of battle is in your hands, my men. Let each fighter think of his own wife, his home. Remember the great works, the triumphs of our fathers. Down to the shore we go to take them on. They're dazed. They've just debarked. They've got no land legs yet. Fortune speeds the bold. Urging them on, but torn. Whom to lead the shore assault? Whom to trust to besiege the embattled walls? And all the while Aeneas lands his men by planks from the high sterns. Many, who watch for the ebbing waves to slip by, go vaulting into the shallows. Others row for shore. Tarchon, on the way for a welcome stretch of beach where the shoals don't churn, no breakers booming low, but a smooth, unbroken groundswell glides towards the sand, abruptly swerves his prow around and spurs his shipmates. Now, my chosen hands, you bend to your sturdy oars. Lift up your prows, thrust them on, beaks plowing this enemy coast, keels cutting their own furrows. I don't flinch from a wreck in such a mooring once I've seized the land. At Tarchon's command, his shipmates rise to their oars and drive their vessel foaming onto the Latian shore until their beaks have gripped dry land. All keels beached safe and sound, all but your own ship, Tarchon. Aground on the shoals, long impaled on a jagged reef, it teeters back and forth, tiring the waves, and suddenly breaks up, flinging crews in the surf, ensnared in the shattered oars and bobbing thwarts as the heavy backwash drags their feet from shore. But Turnus wastes no time. He deploys his full force quickly against the Trojan force to fight them at the beaches. Trumpets blare. Aeneas is the first to attack the beleaguered farmers, and, sign of the battle's outcome, brings the Latins down, killing mighty Theron, who dared to attack Aeneas. His sword pierces the bronze mesh of Theron's tunic, stiff with its golden scales, and drains his gaping flank. Lychus next, cut live from his dead mother's womb, and hollowed to you, the healer. But what good now to elude the knife at birth? Next Aeneas, as rugged as Cisseus, giant Gyas clubbed their way through his ranks. He flung both down to death. No help to them now, the weapons of Hercules, no, nor their own strong arms or their father Melampus, Hercules' mainstay, long as the earth afforded the man his grueling labors. Here's Pharis, watch, hurling his hollow threats as Aeneas hurls his javelin, stakes it square in the man's howling mouth. You too, unlucky Sidon, pursuing Clytius, your new love, his cheeks soft with the first gold down of youth. You would have gone down under the Trojan's hand and died a pitiful death, with all recall of your young boy lovers lost, if a pack of your brothers had not blocked Aeneas, 7 of Phorcys' offspring rifling 7 spears, some glancing off his shield and his helmet, harmless. Others, that loving Venus flicked away, just scratched his body. Aeneas cries to Aeneas, "Give me a sheaf of weapons! I won't miss a single Rutulian with my spear, just as my spears impaled the Greeks at Troy." With that, he seized a heavy lance and wings it hard and straight through the bronze of Maeon's shield. It pounds, ripping open his breast and breastplate both at once. His brother Alcanor runs to brace his falling brother. Quick, but the spear's already flown its bloody way, stabbing his dying arms that hangs from his shoulder, dangling loose by the tendons. Another, Numitor, wrenching out the shaft from his brother's body, went at Aeneas, praying to hit him, pay him back, but not a chance of that. He could only graze the stalwart Achates in the thigh. Now up steps Clausus from Curies, flushed with his young strength, and flings his burly spear from a distance, hits Dryops under the chin, full force to choke the Trojan's throat, as he shouted, cutting off both his voice and life in the same breath, and the brow slams the ground as he vomits clots of blood. 3 Thracians, too, of the north wind's lofty stock, and 3 whom their father Idas and fatherland Ismarus sent away to the wars. But Clausus kills them all, with a novel twist of death for each. Halasus rushes in with Auruncan troops, and Messapus, Neptune's son as well, the brilliant horseman. Trojans and Latins, struggling to root each other, seesawing back and forth as they fight it out on Italy's very doorstep. Like clashing winds in the vast heavens, bursting forth into battle, matched in spirit, in power, no gust surrendering, one to another, neither the winds nor clouds nor seas, all hangs in the balance, gripped in a deadlock. So they clash, the Trojan armies of Latins, foot dug in against foot, man packed against man. Another zone where a torrent had hurled down boulders heaving them far and wide and torn out trees from its banks, when Pallas saw his Arcadians, untrained to attack on foot, and turning tail before the Latins' pursuit. The lay of the rock-choked land convinced them all to desert their horses, so seizing on one last way to stem disaster, now with prayers, now stinging taunts, he fires up their war-lust. "Where are you, flying friends? I beg you now, by your self-respect, your own brave work, by your chief Evander's name, your victories won, by my own rising hopes to match my father's flame. Don't trust to your feet. Hack the foe with swords. That's the way. Over there, where the massed infantry pushes forward, that's where your famous land demands you back with Pallas in the lead. No gods force us on. We're mortals, harried by mortal enemies. They have as many hands and lives as we. Look, the ocean shuts us in with immense blockades of waves. No land to fly to. What, shall we head for the sea? Or Troy?" Fighting words, and he hurls himself at the enemy's massed ranks. First to confront him, Lagus, lured on by a harsh fate. As he tries to lift an enormous rock, Pallas rifles a spear that strikes his spine midway where it parts the ribs, and wrenches back the shaft that's wedged in the bone as his bow pounces down on him, filled with the hope to take his man off guard. But Pallas takes him first, his bow rushing in fury off his guard, berserk with his comrade's death. As Pallas welcomes him with the naked sword, he plunges into his lungs, puffed up with rage. Next he goes for Sthenius, then Anchemolus, sprung from Rhodes' age-old line, a man who dared befoul his own stepmother's bed. You too, you twins, went down on Latian fields, Thymber, Larides, Daucus' sons, identical twins, an endearing puzzlement to your parents till Pallas made a strict distinction between you. Thymber, he lops off your head with one sweep of Evander's sword, and Larides chops your hand, and the fighter's dying hand gropes for its body. Quivering fingers claw for the sword once more. Inflamed by his taunts and watching his brilliant work, the Arcadians, armed with grief and shame, stand braced to meet the enemy. Suddenly, Pallas runs Rhodes through as he races past in his two-horse chariot. That much respite and breathing room had Ilus won. At Ilus, Pallas had flung a rugged spear at long range, but Rhodes, pausing between them, takes the point head-on as he flees from you. Distinguished Teuthras, you and your brother Tyrus, Rhodius, spilling out of his car in death throes, drumming the fields of Italy with his heels. So as in summer, just when the winds he prayed for rise and a shepherd kindles fires through the forest, suddenly all in the midst ignite into one long jagged battle line of fire rampaging through the fields, and held on his perch, he gazes down in triumph, seeing the blaze exulting on, just as your comrade's courage speeds to your rescue, all at a single point, Pallas, and joy fills your heart. But Halasus, hot for combat, charges against them now, compressing all his force behind his weapons. Laden, he butchers, ferries, Demodocus. A flash of his sword, and he slices off Stramonius's hand, just as it clutched to his throat. He smashes Thoas full in the face with a rock, and crushes out his skull in a spray of brains and blood. Halasus' father, foreseeing his son's doom, hid him deep in the woods. But when the old man's eyes went glazing blind in death, the fates, taking the son in hand, devoted him here to Evander's lance. Pallas attacks him, praying first, "Now, Father Tiber, grant the spear I'm about to hurl a lucky path through the rugged Halasus' chest. I'll strip him of weapons, hang them on your oak." The Tiber heard his prayer. As Halasus guarded Aeneid, the hapless fighter left his chest defenseless, bared to the Arcadian lands. But Lausus, who plays a front-line role in war, won't let his soldiers flinch at Pallas' carnage. First, he finishes Abas, quick to face him there, that burly knot, that bulwark of battle. Arcadia's prime he hacks down the Tuscans, and you whose bodies went unscarred by the Greeks, you Trojans too. and the lines of fighters clash, matched in chiefs, in power. The rear guard packs tight, no room for maneuver, no spears hurled in the press. Here Pallas drives and lunges, Lausus opposes him. All but equal in age, remarkably handsome both, but fortune grudged them both safe passage home. Yet Jove would not allow those fighters to clash. He saved each man for his own fate, soon now, under a stronger foe. Now his loving sister, Juturna, spurs her brother Turnus quickly to Lausus' side. Turnus races his chariot straight through the ranks and shouts as he sees his comrades, "Now is the time to halt your fighting! I will go after Pallas. Pallas is mine now, my prize alone. If only his father were here to watch it all in person." At that, his comrades cleared off from the field, and as they withdrew, young Pallas, struck dumb by that arrogant command, runs his eyes over Turnus' enormous frame, scanning every feature from where he stood and glancing grimly. Pallas volleys back these words to counter the words his high and mighty enemy used. "Now's my time to win some glory, either for stripping off a wealth of spoils or dying a noble death. My father can stand up under either fate. Enough of your threats." Enough said. Pallas marches out to the center of the field, and the blood runs cold in each Arcadian heart. Down from his chariot Turnus vaulted, nerved to attack the enemy face to face on foot. Like some lion that spots from his high lookout, far off on the plain and flexing for combat there, an immense bull, and the lion plunges toward his kill. And that is the image of Turnus coming on for battle. When Pallas judged him just in range of his spear, he moved up first, if only fortune would speed his daring, pitting himself against unequal odds, and he cries out to the arching heavens, "Hercules, beg my father's board, the welcome you met as stranger. I beg you, stand by the great task I'm tackling now. May Turnus see me stripping the bloody armor off his body, bear the sight of his conqueror, eyes dulled in death." Hercules heard the young man's prayer, suppressed a groan that rose up from his heart, and wept helpless tears as the father said these tender words to his son. "Each man has his day, and the time of life is brief for all, and never comes again. But to lengthen out one's fame with action, that's the work of courage. How many sons of gods went down under Troy's high wall? Why, I lost a son of my own in there with the rest, Sarpedon. For Turnus, too, his own fate calls, and the man has reached the end of all his days on earth." So Jove declares, and turns his glance away from the Latian fields below. Where Pallas rifles his spear full force and sweeps his flashing sword from its casing sheath, the spear goes flying on, and it hits the armor high up, where the bronze rims the shoulder's ridge, and glancing off, it rams its way through the shield's plies, and finally scrapes the skin of Turnus' massive body. But Turnus, balancing long his oak-wood spear with its iron tip, flings it at Pallas with winging words, "Now we'll see if my spear pierces deeper." And Pallas' shield, for all its layers of iron and bronze, its countless layers of oxhide, rounding it out for strength, still Turnus' vibrant spear goes shattering through the shield with stabbing impact, piercing the breastplate's guard and Pallas' broad chest. Pallas wrenches the spearhead warm from his wound. No use. His blood and his life breath follow hard on the same track out. Collapsing onto his wound, his armor clanging over him, Pallas dies, pounding an enemy's earth with his bloody mouth, as Turnus trumpets over him, "You Arcadians, listen! Take a message home to Evander. Tell him this. The Pallas I send him back will serve him right. Whatever tribute a tomb can give, whatever balm a burial, I am only too glad to give. But the welcome he gave Aeneas costs him dear." With that, he stamped his left foot on the corpse and stripped away the sword belt's massive weight, engraved with his monstrous crime. How one night, their wedding night, that troop of grooms was butchered, fouling their wedding chamber with pools of blood, all carved by Clonus, Eurydice' son, in priceless gold. Now Turnus glories in that spoil, exults to make it his. How blind men's minds to their fate and what their future holds. How blind to limits when fortune lifts men high. Yes, the time will come when Turnus would give his all to have Pallas whole, intact, when all this spoil, this very day he'll loathe. But a huge throng of friends is attending Pallas, moaning, weeping, and bears him back upon his shield. Oh, you return to your father, his great grief and glory. This day first gave you to war, and this day takes you off, and still you leave behind great heaps of Latian dead. Such a heavy blow. Now a trusted herald, no empty rumor, wings the news to Aeneas. His men stand on the razor edge of death. Now is the time to rescue his routed Trojans. The closest enemy ranks he mows down with iron, reaping a good wide swath through the Latian front, blazing with rage as his sword blade hacks that path, hunting for you, Turnus, so proud of your latest kill. As Pallas, Evander, all of them rise before Aeneas' eyes, the welcoming board that met him that first day, the right hands clasped in trust. And 4 sons of Sulmo, fighters all, and the same number reared by Ufens. Aeneas takes them alive to offer Pallas' shade, and soaks his flaming pyre with captive blood. And next he wings from afar a deadly spear at Megas, ducking under it, quick as the quivering shaft flies past, and Megas, hugging Aeneas' knees, implores, I beg you, by your father's ghost, by your hopes for rising Iulus, spare this life of mine for my father and my son. Ours is a stately mansion. Deep inside lie buried bars of ridged silver and heavy weights of gold, some of it tooled, some untooled, mine alone. Now, how can a Trojan victory hinge on me? How can a single life make such a difference? Megas begged no more as Aeneas lashed back. All those bars of silver and gold you brag of, save them for your sons. Such bargaining in battle, Turnus already cut it short when he cut Pallas down. So the ghost of my father, so my son declares. And seizing Megas' helmet tightly in his left hand, and wrenching him back, his neck, as the man prays on, he digs his sword blade deep down to the hilt. Hard by, the son of Aeneid, and the priest of Phobos and Diana, his temples wreathed in the consecrated bands, all white in his robes, brilliant in his array. Aeneas confronts him, coursing him down the fields and rearing over him as he stumbles, slaughters him, shrouding his brilliant robes with a mighty shade. Serestus gathers the armor, shoulders it home to you, King Mars, your trophy now. Now Cacalus, Vulcan's stock, and Umbro fresh from the Martian highlands, rally their troops as Aeneas rages on against them. His slashing sword has already hacked off Anxur's left arm, and his round buckler slammed the ground. He'd shouted some great boast, trusting his strength could match his words, probably lifting his spirits sky high and promising gray hairs for himself and a ripe old age, as Aeneas faced down Tarchidus, gloating in burnished gear and born to Faunus, god of the woods, by the wood nymph Dryope. Tarchidus blocked his path as Aeneas blazed on, and cocking back his spear, he flings it and stakes the breastplate fast to the shield's groaning weight. Then as Tarchidus begs him, struggling to keep on begging, all for nothing, Aeneas dashes his head to the ground and rolling the man's warm trunk along and looming over him, vaunts with all the hatred in his heart. Now lie there, you great horrific sight. No loving mother will bury you in ground or weight your body down with your father's tombs. You'll be abandoned now to carrion birds, or plunged in the deep sea, and swept away by the waves, and ravening fish will dart and lick your wounds. Plunging on he goes, overtaking their finest, Turnus' front-line troops, Antaeus, Lucas, and stalwart Numa and Camers with tawny locks, magnanimous Vulcan's son, the richest landholder in all Italy once, the lord of Amyclae, quiet town. Aeneas, like Aegon, who, they say, had 100 arms and 100 hands, and flames blazed from his 50 maws, and chest when he fought down Jupiter's bolts of lightning, clashing as many matching shields, unsheathing as many swords. So Aeneas now, rampaging in triumph all across the plain, once his sword had warmed to the slaughter. Look there, He heads for Niphaeus' car, and his 4 horses raising their chests against him. But as they see him ramping on in his loping strides and hear him groan in fury, round they wheel in terror, rearing back, spilling their driver out the chariot, whirling it down to shore. While into the melee, Lucagus and his brother Liger, chariot borne by 2 white steeds, the brother reinsman guiding the team as Lucagus flaunts his naked steel. But Aeneas could not suffer their fiery charge. He charged them, looming huge, his spear poised as Liger shouted out, "What you see here are not Diomedes' team, Achilles' car, or the plains of Troy. Now on your own land you see the end of your wars, of your own life too, or on our own land." I apologize. Such maddened words he hurls, but no words come from Aeneas now. He hurls his spear in reply against his foe, and then, as Lucagus, bending into the stroke, slaps the team with his flat sword, his left foot thrust out, braced for attack, Aeneas' weapon pierces the bottom plies of his gleaming buckler, ripping into his left groin. Flung from the car, he writhes on the field in death, as righteous Aeneas sends some bitter words his way. "Lucagus, no panicked pair has let your chariot down. No horse is shying away from an enemy's empty shade. It's you, tumbling off your chariot. You desert your team." He sees the yoke as his luckless brother, slipping off the war car, flinging his helpless arms towards Aeneas, prayed, "I beg you, beg by the ones who bore a son like you, great man of Troy, now spare my life, pity my prayers." Praying on as Aeneas broke in, "A far cry from the words you mouthed before. Die! No brother deserts a brother here." Then with his blade he carved wide open Liger's chest, his hidden cache of life. So much slaughter the Trojan commander spreads throughout the plain, like a stream in spate or a black tornado storming on, till at last the young Ascanius and his troops break free and put the camp behind. The great blockade is over. At the same moment, Jove adeptly spurs on Juno. "My own sweet sister, my sweet wife as well. It's Venus, just as you thought. Your judgment never fails. She is the one who supports the Trojan forces, not their own strong hands that clutch for combat, not their unflinching spirits seasoned hard to peril." And Juno replies, her head bent low, "My dearest husband, why rake my anxious heart? I dread your grim commands. Your love for me, if it held the force it once held and should hold still, you never deny me this. All-powerful one, the power to spirit Turnus, clear of battle, save him all unscathed for his father Daunus. But now, as it is, let him die and pay his debt to the Trojans, pay with his own loyal blood. Still, Turnus takes his birth from our own breed, his name too. Polymnus was his forebearer, 4 generations back, and his lavish hands had heaped your threshold high with treasure troves of gifts." The king of lofty Olympus countered briefly, "If what you want is reprieve from instant death, some breathing space for the doomed young man, and you acknowledge the limits I lay down, then whisk your Turnus away, pluck him out of the closing grip of fate. That much room for indulgence I will give you. But if some deeper longing for mercy stirs beneath your prayers, some notion the whole thrust of the war can shift and change, you're feeding empty hopes." Juno replies in tears, "What if your heart should grant what you begrudge in words, and the life of Turnus were firmly set for years to come? For now, a crushing end awaits an innocent man, unless I'm lost to the truth and swept away. Oh, if only my fears were false and I deceived. If only you have the power, would bend your will to a better goal." With that appeal, headlong down from the heights of heaven she dove, girt up in clouds, unfurling a whirlwind through the air, and winging straight as the Trojan ranks and Latian camp. Then out of thin mist, the goddess creates a phantom. Aeneas is double, but a strange unearthly sight, a shadow stripped of power, and decking it out in Trojan armor, matching the shield and crest on Aeneas' godlike head, she fills it with hollow words, gives it a voice. A sound without sense, and it apes his marching stride. Like ghosts that after our death, they say, will flutter on, or dreams that deceive our senses lost in sleep. But the buoyant shade parades before the front, shaking a spear in his enemy's face and taunting. Turnus attacks it, rifling a vibrant lance, A long cast, but the phantom swerves away, and Turnus in turmoil, thinking Aeneas had really turned tail and fled, and drinking deep of the vapid cup of hope, cries out, "Where are you racing, Aeneas? Don't abandon your sworn bride. My right hand will give you the earth you crossed to the seas to find." He shouts in hot pursuit, flashing his naked sword, blind to the winds that scatter all his triumph. A ship chanced to be moored to a spur of cliff, her ladders and gangways set for action. King Osinius sailed her there, straight from the shores of Clusium. Here Aeneas's frightened shadow throws itself into hiding. Turnus hard on its heels, nothing can keep him back, bounding over the gangways, leaping the high decks. He had barely touched the prow when Juno bursts the cables, rips the ship from her moorings, blows her out to sea on the tide ebbing fast. And now the misty phantom, no longer hunting for cover, flutters up on high, dissolving into a dark cloud. And all the while Aeneas calls on Turnus to fight, but the man is gone. So the many men who block his way he sends to death, as Juno's winds are spinning Turnus around in mid-sea. In glancing backwards, knowing nothing, no thanks for escape, he lifts his hand in prayer, his voice to the stars. "Almighty Father, so you find my guilt so great? You're dead set on my paying such a price? Where have I come from? Where am I racing now? What is this flight that takes me home? A coward! Will I ever see my Laurentine walls and camp again? What of those gallant men who backed my sword and me? All of them. What disgrace! I deserted them all to die, an unspeakable death. Now I see them straggling, lost. I hear them groaning as they go under. What shall I do? If only the earth gaped deep enough to take me down. Better pity me, winds. Turnus begs you with all his heart. Dash this ship on a reef or cliff, or run her aground on the Syrtes' savage shoals where no Rutulian, no rumor that knows my shame can dog my heels. Praying, his mind at sea, wavering here, there, crazed by his own disgrace, should he fling himself on his sword and thrust the ruthless blade through his ribs? Or plunge in the heavy swells and swim back to the bay and pitch himself at Trojan spears once more? 3 times he probed each way. 3 times Juno, with all her power, held the prince's fury down, pitying him in her heart, and kept him hard on course, cutting the deep as favoring tide and current sweep him home to his father Daunus' ancient city. But now, Mezentius' turn. That moment at Jove's command he carries on the fight, attack the victorious Trojans, true. But his own Etruscan troops, with all their hate and showering weapons, rush to attack him, quite alone, their one and only target. He, like a headland, jutted into the ocean wastes, and bared to the wind's rage, braving the breakers, weathered out all force and fury of sea and sky, stands firm himself. He hacks to ground Dolichaon's son, Hebrus, Laticus with him, and Palmus who spins and runs. He smashes Laticus square in the face and mouth with a rock, a crag of a rock, and cuts the knees from under the racing Palmus, leaves him slowly writhing in pain, and gives his armor to Lausus, bronze for his shoulders, plumes to crown his crest. The next to die? Euanthes the Phrygian, Mimas too, a comrade of Paris, just his age. On the same night, Theano brought into the light the sons of Amycus. Hecuba, great with the torch, bore Paris. Paris lies dead in the city of his fathers. Mimas lies unsung on the Latian shore. Mezentius, picture the wild boar that's harried down from a ridge by snapping packs of hounds, some beast Mount Vesuvius shielded for long, or long the Latian forest fed on the reeds that crowd their marshes. Once stampeded into the nets, he jolts to a halt, snorts, at bay, the hackles rising up on his neck. No hunter bold enough to approach him. Take him on. At a safe remove, they attack with spears and shouts. But the boar stands fast, unflinching. Where to charge? Anywhere, grinding his tusks and shaking spears from his back. So Mezentius now, for all his attackers' rightful fury, none of them has the spine to fight him, swords drawn. They just bait him with missiles, far-flung cries, all at a safe remove. Now Acron, a Greek, had just arrived from Corythus' old frontier, an exile, leaving his marriage in the lurch. As Mezentius spied him rooting the lines far off, crested in purple plumes, the blue of his bride-to-be, like a famished lion stalking to the cattle pens for prey, for the hunger will often drive him mad. Just let him spot some goat on the run or a stag's antlers branching high. His big jaws agape at the sport, his mane bristles, then a pouncing assault, and he clenches his quarry's flesh as the sopping gore soaks his ruthless maw. Just so Mezentius pounces hotly onto the enemy masses. He lays unlucky Acron low, his heels pounding the dark earth as he gasps his life away and dyes the weapon splintered off in his body, blood red. Orides darts away, but Mezentius would not stoop to killing him on the run with a spear cast from behind, stabbing him unseen. No, he dueled him man to man, proving himself the better man by force of arms. Not stealth. And next, stamping his foot on the corpse and leaning hard on the spear, Mezentius shouts out, "Here, men, lies no mean part of their battle strength. Orides once so tall," and his comrades shout back, redoubling the victor's cry as Orides pants his last. "You don't have long to crow, whoever you are, my victor. Vengeance waits. The same fate watches over you, too. You'll lie here in the same field very soon." "Die now," Mezentius cries, grinning through his rage. "As for my own death, the father of gods and king of men will see to that." Mezentius, vaunting, pries the spear from Orides' body. Grim repose and an iron sleep press down his eyes and seal their light in a night that never ends. Caedicus chops Alcathous down, Sacrator Hydaspes. Rapo kills Parthenus, then the indestructible Orses. Messapus levels Clonius, then Lysaon's son, Aricades, one thrown from a reinless horse and sprawling aground, the other fighting on foot. On foot, a Lycian too. One Agis strode up now, but Valerius, no poor heir to his father's battle prowess, hurled him down as Thronius fell to Salius, Salius to Nalces, crack marksmen with spears and arrows both, blindsiding in front afar. Ruthless Mars was drawing the battle out, dead even now, equaling out the grief, the mutual slaughter. Victors and victims killed in turn, both sides locked, not a thought of flight, not here. The gods and halls of Jove are filled with pity, feeling the futile rage of both great armies, mourning the labors borne by mortal men. Here Venus, over against her, Juno, gazing down, as Tisiphone seethes amid the milling thousands, that livid, lethal fury. But here Mezentius comes, brandishing high his massive spear, and storming on like a whirlwind down the plain, and enormous as Orion, marching in mid-sea, plowing a path through the deep swells, his shoulders rearing over the waves, or hauling down from a ridge the trunk of an age-old mountain ash. As he treads the ground, he hides his heads in clouds. So vast, Mezentius, marching on in gigantic armor. Aeneas, spotting him out in the long front ranks, comes up to cross his path. But he holds firm, unafraid, awaiting his great-hearted foe, stands firm in all his mass. His eyes narrow, gauging the length of his spear will need, he cries, "Let this right arm, my only god, and the spear I hurl be with me now. I dedicate you, Lausus, decked in the spoils I strip from that pirate's corpse, my son, my living trophy over Aeneas." Enough. He hurled his spear, and whizzing in from a distance, winging on, it ricocheted off Aeneas' shield to hit that hardy fighter Antores, yards away, between the flank and groin. Antores sent from Argos, Hercules' aide, who bound himself to Evander, settling down in the king's Italian city. Laid low by a wound aimed for another, luckless man, he looks up at the heavens, longing for his dear Argos as he dies. Next, the grave Aeneas flings a spear at Mezentius, right through the buckler's 3 round plates of bronze, through the linen plies, the bull hides triply stitched, the spear pierced, plunging deep in the man's groin. But its force stopped short of home. In a flash, Aeneas, overjoyed now at the sight of Tuscan blood, sweeps his sword from its sheath and closes fast on his staggered foe. But Lausus, seeing it all, groaned low with the love he bore his father. Tears poured down his face, and now Lausus, your fated, brutal death and your brave deeds, If glorious work long ages old can win belief, neither your record nor yourself will I ever fail to sing, young soldier. You deserve our praise. Now his father was backing off, defenseless, weighed down, dragging his enemy's spear shaft trailing from his shield. So the son sprang forward, darting into the moil, and just as Aeneas rose up, his arm reared for attack. Lausus, ducking under the stroke, parried the sword, holding the Trojan off, while shouting comrades harried Aeneas with missiles, pelting him in from afar, till under his son's shield the father could escape. Aeneas keeps down, huddling under his own shield, enraged. Think of a cloudburst bearing down with gusts of hail, and every plowman, every farmhand, quits the fields, and the traveler keeps safe in a welcome refuge under some river banks or cavern's rocky arch, while rain pelts the earth. So when the sun returns, they can all get on with the day's work. So Aeneas, overpowered by missiles left and right, braves out the cloudburst of war till its thunder dies away, and then he taunts Lausus, threatens Lausus. Why hurry death? Hurry your death, daring beyond your powers? Your love for your father lures you into folly. But Lausus rages on, berserk as the savage fury surges higher now in the Trojan captain's heart. The fates bind up the last threads of Lausus's life as Aeneas drives his tempered sword through the youth, plunging it home hilt deep. The point impaled his shield, a flimsy defense for the youngster's brash threats, and the shirt his mother wove him of soft gold mesh, and his lap filled up with blood, and then his life slipped through the air, sorrowing down to the shades, and left his corpse behind. Ah, but then, when the son of Anchises saw his dying look, his face, that face so ashen, awesome in death, he groaned from his depths in pity, reached out his hand as this picture of love for a father pierced his heart, and said, Forlorn young soldier, what can Aeneas in all honor give you to match your glory now? What gifts are worthy of such a noble spirit? Keep your armor that gave you so much joy. I give you back to your father's ash, and shades it if it offers any solace. And this, at last, may comfort you for a death so cruel, unlucky boy. You went down under the great hand of great Aeneas. With that, he rounded hard on Lausus's comrades, slow to move, and lifted their captain's body off the ground where Lausus was defiling his braided hair with blood. But Lausus's father was just stanching his wounds in the Tiber's waters, leaning his body against a tree trunk, resting now. Nearby, his brazen helmet swings from a branch, and his heavy armor lies on the grass in peace. Picked young soldiers stand in a ring around him, his combed, flowing beard spreading across his chest. He tries to limber his neck, panting, heaving in torment. Time and again he asks for news of Lausus. Again he dispatches runners to recall him, bearing a stricken father's orders. Yes, but Lausus, weeping comrades are bearing his lifeless body home on his shield, a great soldier taken down by a great wound. But his father hears their wails, far off, and stirred by a grim foreboding, knows it all. Soiling his gray hair with dust, flinging both hands to the skies, he clings to his son's body, crying, Was I so seized by the lust for life, my son? I let you take my place before the enemy's sword? My own flesh and blood, what, your father saved by your own wounds, kept alive by your death? Oh, now at last I know the griefs of exile. I, in all my pain, at last a wound strikes home. I've stained your name, my son, with my own crimes, detested, drummed from my father's scepter and their throne. I owed a price to my land and people who despise me. If only I'd paid in full with my own guilty life by any death on earth. But I live on. Not yet have I left the land of men and light of day, but I will leave it all. In the same breath, he struggles to stand erect on his damaged thigh, and though his strength is sapped by his deep wound, his spirit is unbroken. He calls for his horse, his pride, his mainstay, always the mount he rode triumphant from every battle. Seeing it grieving, he begins, Long have we lived together, Rebus, if anything in this mortal world lives long. Today, Either you'll carry back those bloody arms we strip in triumph, parade Aeneas' head, and avenge together Lausus' pains. Or if no force can clear our path, you will go down with me. For I can't believe, my brave one, you could bend to a stranger's orders, bear a Trojan master. Mezentius mounted up, his weight settling onto the horse's back in the old familiar way, both hands holding the heft of well-honed spears, his helmet aflash with bronze and bristling horsehair crest. And into the surge of battle, so he plunged, churning with mighty shame. With grief and madness all aswirl in that one fighting heart, 3 times he shouted out to Aeneas, a great resounding shout, and Aeneas knew that voice, and his prayer rose up in joy. So grant it, Father of gods and high Apollo, bring the battle on. That challenge made, he closes on his enemy, spear poised for the kill as Mezentius answers back. Why, you king of cruelty, now that you've killed my son, why try to make me cringe? That was the only way you could destroy me. I never flinch at death or bow to a single god. No more words. I'm here to die, but I bring you these gifts first. And with that, he flung a javelin at his enemy, planting one shaft after another, racing round in a sweeping ring. But the golden boss of Aeneas' shield stands fast. 3 times Mezentius rides around him, hurling his weapons, keeping the Trojan on his left. 3 times Aeneas wheels round with him, bearing a grisly thicket of lances bristling on his shield. Then, tired of all delays, of ripping out the shafts, outmatched on the defensive, Aeneas, now at last at his wits' end, bursts forth and hurls a spear, and it splits the temples of Mezentius' warhorse. Back it rears, flailing the air with flying hooves and throwing its rider, pitching headlong down in a tangled mass, its shoulder joint torn out. It crushes Mezentius' body to the ground. Trojan and Latin war cries set the sky on fire as Aeneas dashes up, and wrenching his sword from its sheath, he triumphs over him. Where's the fierce Mezentius now? Where is his murderous fury? And the Tuscan fighters, gazing up at the sky and drinking in the air as he returned to his senses, said, My mortal enemy, why do you ridicule me, threaten me with death? Killing is no crime. I never engaged in combat on such terms. No such pact did Lausus seal between you and me that you would spare my life. One thing is all I ask. If the vanquished may ask a favor of the victor, let my body be covered by the earth. Too well I know how many people's savage hatred swirls around me. Shield me, I implore you, from their fury. Let me rest in the grave beside my son, in the comradeship of death. With those words, fully aware, he offers up his throat to the sword, and across his armor pours his life in waves of blood. That is the end of Book 10.